My City Roll and Build. No alarms and no surprises. This is a roll and write reimagining of the game My City by Rainer Knizia, same designer in both games. I like the original My City because it is a simple tile laying game with a strong legacy element, with things that are revealed over time and that materially change the various boards on which people create their cities. It's nice to see a legacy idea in a simple Euro game. And now, well, again, I like My City and I like roll and write games, so I had to play this one for sure. Now, the story element, the plot twists are probably not going to be too strong. It's not quite the same as maybe a legacy game, an adventure game. But some of you still may not want any spoilers. So in order to preserve the surprise, I decided to do this. In the opening segment, I'm gonna tell you about the game in general, based only on the first scenario, or the first episode, and then I'll have a section in which I give you an overview of the other scenarios, but I'll put a warning there, and then there's gonna be the conclusion, so that you can just skip the midsection of this video in case you really want to preserve the surprise as much as possible. So the game comes with this box, very portable, even more so if you just travel with the dice and with some of the scenarios. You're gonna need one of these sheets per player. They're double-sided. You just yank a bunch out of this block here, and you'll need to provide your own writing implements. The game comes with 12 scenarios called episodes divided into 4 chapters. So chapter 1 has episodes from 1 to 3. Chapter 2 is the next 3 episodes, and so on and so forth. You can play any and all of these in any order you want, maybe mostly. But you know what? It's your game. Yes, you still can. Even some of those that you're supposed to play them in order, you're still going to enjoy building your city. Not a big deal. You can play them in any order, but ideally, as conceived by the designer, you're playing them in chapters. And so you're going to play 3 in a row. And then there's going to be both a score for each episode and a score for the end of that chapter. I think I did that for the first chapter, and I played that multiplayer with some friends, and then I played the remaining ones solo. The game is 100% soloable. Nothing changes when you are playing with other players. You'll roll, build your city, and score points at the end. You're trying to beat their score. And when you play solo, you play exactly the same. But you're trying to beat your previous score or thresholds indicated in the rule book. There are some scenarios where maybe it's better, there is a specific kind of interaction, but in general, there's no interaction, not even indirect, not even when it comes to scoring. So basically no difference in most cases between multiplayer and solo. So, at the beginning of each round, these 2 dice are rolled. They represent different combinations of squares, and they have the little dot. And once you roll them, you place those 2 halves of a dots next to each other to indicate the shape. This was rolled, that's the shape we're going to draw. This was rolled, then just a little tiny square. You may send the symbol, which counts as a blank in some scenarios, but may have a different meaning in different scenarios. I suppose that this is the shape that we rolled. There's also this other die that tells us the kind of building. There are 3 kind of buildings. The one with the diagonal lines, with the crosses, and the one that is completely filled in. Let's do this one because I like that pattern there. So once we get our shape, we gotta draw it. We gotta draw it somewhere on our little thing. And different episodes will have different maps that change and give you different restrictions and opportunities and different things to score. The first building that you build will be adjacent to the river, and suppose that's what I'm gonna draw. I'm gonna draw it right there, and that's it. That's it. That's for my turn, and then somebody, doesn't matter who, will roll the dice. And suppose that this is what we got. Booyah, the Tetris L. And we need to make it completely dark. And we're gonna draw that one. It needs now, after the first, all buildings need to be adjacent to previous buildings. You cannot build on the mountains. You cannot build on the forest. You can build on trees, but you don't want to. You can build on rocks, and you will want to, because otherwise you lose points. And suppose for this building here, I'm gonna do that. Like so. I need to fill it in so I can tell. For some of the scenarios, it may be important also to know how many buildings you have. So for example, suppose I need to draw something here. I like to actually draw slightly inside the edges, not on the edges, so I can tell that those are different buildings. And I like the diagonal ones, because then also I can differentiate which one is which. So maybe after a couple of turns, my board will look like this. There's also a square that comes up maybe more often than I like. And this would be the kind of building, the one with the crosses. So that's the general idea. You can pass, but each time that you pass, you need to fill in one of those bubbles. And at the end of the scenario, there will be a penalty. You will lose the number of points indicated under the rightmost bubble that you filled in. If that's the situation at the end of the game, I'll lose 5 points because of that. And then you will lose points for other things, such as lose or gain. In episode 1, it's really mainly about filling stuff as much as possible. You will score 1 point for each tree that is still visible at the end of the game. You will lose 1 point for each rock that is still visible, and 1 point lost for each space that is empty. And you'll continue playing until you decide to drop out of the game. And just simple as that. At some point you realize, I'm not likely to fill in any more spaces, so I'll just pass. I will pass for good. I'll drop out of the game. This way I don't have to pass doing these things. That's it. That's the idea. Roll the dice, build a new building, roll, build a new building, or pass until all players have dropped out of the game, and then you will score points and see who has the highest score. And again, the heart of the game is from the variety of different things that happens here. So, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Next, I'm gonna show you the other scenarios. If you don't wanna see those, now would be the time to jump to the conclusions. So, in chapter 2, it's still very simple. Actually, episode 2. Now we have pretty much the same situation, but now we're scoring clusters of buildings of the same type. In the first one, it doesn't matter the type. Now it's a lot more interesting because we got that extra thing. You're going to score 1 point for each building in the largest group for each kind. Episode 3, we got the wells. We can build on them, but if we don't, we place 4 different buildings next to each other. We score for extra points. Still very similar. And you'll sure recognize if you play My City some of the same things that you would score in those, but in this other form. Now you notice the map has changed, so that's pretty interesting because if I remember correctly, the river never changes in the other game. We also have the churches. When this symbol is rolled, it's mandatory to build one of the churches. And if you can't, you have to drop out of the game. And these churches don't do absolutely anything. They just take up space. Like in the original game, there's a certain secular element to this game because the churches are mainly very scary. You usually don't want them. There isn't much that you can do with them, especially in this episode. After a while, in this scenario, you still have churches that you must build, but at least they will score you points if you have 3 types of buildings adjacent to them, which you won't always pull off. So the churches are always annoying, sometimes profitable. And here again we have we start at the church, and the rule is that all buildings must be constructed, even the churches. You cannot pass, as you can see. There's no section for that. You start building from that church, so it becomes a little bit of a temporary theocracy until there's a big flood and no one worries about those no more. Well, you do, but now the churches are a lot smaller than they used to, so we play on a different map, and we start at the sawmill. Sawmill equal the forest is up for grabs, and so now we can build on it. And we can also build on the plateaus. This is also, actually from the previous scenario, is when you start having things, a bonus for the first to build something. And these are scenarios where you have the little bit of race element of indirect interaction because you want to do those things before the other players do. I guess you can play secretly so people don't see, but we're not that mean in my group, and so we usually, in this kind of game, we don't worry so much about it. Actually, yeah, I played one of these with my wife, and we were very friendly until I won every game. Then, anyways, we started the sawmill, and now we have a race to cover the gold and to cover all the forest spaces. The last 3 episodes from the last chapter, we got the bandits. Really fun. I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2 incidentally, and I kept thinking, oh, Arthur Morgan, let's see if we can trap him. I pretend to be the Pinkertons, but with buildings. So the idea now that you want to surround these bandits because each bandit is not surrounded at the end of the game will lose you 3 points. They also played in sequence so that if a bandit was not completely surrounded, not capturing one scenario, then that bandit surfaces on the next one, and these squares here are just a reminder of where you may have to place a bandit if you didn't capture it in the previous one, didn't surround it with buildings. And these are the scenarios where you have an extra element if you play them in order, but I don't see any other where that really matters all that much. We also got fortresses, a special kind of building, so we're really ramping it up because bandits. And again, with this, that symbol here, again, means you get to construct a special building. And you can start at any fortress here. So, and there's also a bonus for a complete group of building types, meaning if every building like this or every building like that is part of a continuous group, you score a bonus. So these are the 12 scenarios, the 12 chapters that you find in My City Roll and Build. Now, for the conclusions, I like it. I like it a lot. I don't know if I like it more than the original game. The original game, of course, has a lot more to it with stickers, you wrote on the boards, but also it took longer to set up and to organize all the pieces. You were placing down the actual tiles, and so there's definitely material, tangible pleasure in that one, but there's also pleasure, I find, in writing on the board, and that's one of the reasons that direct feeling of connection with gameplay, very tactile, that I get from a roll and write game, for example. I'm probably gonna finish, when I'm done with this video, I'm probably gonna play this scenario and finish it. Also some of the other ones that I started as I was playing this, as I was explaining to you. Because it's also very portable. You can also set it aside in the middle of a game and come back later. Extremely flexible, works very well as a solitaire game. It's very simple, but it has a lot of interesting little tiny decisions. Here is always a fun puzzle. And as you go up, the scenarios will change, spoiler-free conclusions, but there will be more things to score, different things. So it really brings great variety from scenario to scenario around a mechanic that in itself is so simple, so linear, and yet so so satisfying. Oh, such a satisfying mechanic. That's just the way it is. So, I recommend it. If you like the original game, if you like roll and write games, and I prefer my roll and write games usually to be pretty simple and intuitive, this is a great one. I was able to play with friends, with family, alone, very flexible, very portable. It's summer, bring it with you when you're camping, and then be very zen and use the old sheet to start your fire at night. My City Roll and Build. It's fun, it's simple, it's light, and I very much enjoyed it.